Hey everyone, this is Chris, and you're listening to / watching One Cross Radio. And today we are rejoined by nobody. It's just me. For no real reason other than I wanted to do this topic and I couldn't get a guest today. But it is one I will talk about with people another time. But I did want to start off with two specific shout outs before we get into it. Our good friends over at Redeemed Otaku have a YouTube channel, and they're now starting to put content on there more frequently. So be sure to check them out. Just hit up Redeemed Otaku at YouTube. If you Google search it, it'll show up, and I'll attach the link in the description. The other channel I wanted to shout out on YouTube is Up From the Depths. This channel, this team, I don't know if it's one cat. It's always one person narrating, but I don't know if he's got a team of people involved, and I'm not trying to burn anybody. Anyways, this channel does great reviews of the entire Godzilla series, and now they've moved into the Gamera series. So if you want to check those out, even if you don't ever want to sit down and watch the movies, but you want to learn like, hey, what was the reception? What do fans think of these? Most of the reviews are short. The longest is 20 minutes. The average is 5 to 8. It's a really, really good channel. So check them out. Up From the Depths on YouTube. I'll attach that link as well. So today's topic is one I actually did a post about on the 2099 One Cross Street website a while ago, but Jill and I have been moving through the Star Wars movies over the past couple weeks. We watched the anti-cheese cuts of the prequels, which make them much more watchable. We just watched Empire Strikes Back last night, and then tomorrow or another time or sometime soon we're gonna watch Jedi. I really want to watch Rogue One. I also I dig Solo, so I want to revisit it. We'll see if we do. We'll probably do The Force Awakens, but most likely not The Last Jedi, since it's garbage. Fight me, Steve. We're gonna fight about this sometime soon, sir, because I know you listen. And then of course plug for eventually Steve and I will be doing a podcast on the upcoming Spider-Man Homecoming, which drops the weekend before this episode gets posted. And another episode I'll be doing at sometime soon is just kind of a thoughts and reviews on the past 4 movies I've seen. I've seen Godzilla, King of the Monsters. We saw Aladdin. We saw X-Men Dark Phoenix, and we saw friggin' Men in Black International. I was going to do an episode strictly on Godzilla, but that time has passed, and now I think I'm going to do one on the 4 of those. Yeah, anyways, so today's topic proper, we are looking at some of my favorite elements from the former Star Wars expanded universe, which is now called Legends. When Disney bought Lucasfilm in 2014, at first they weren't commenting on any of this. They weren't saying what was what, but then they decided that they were going to end the expanded universe as it was. It was now no longer continuity, and then they were rolling forward with their own continuity, which I know a lot of people were upset about, and in some aspects I still am. I miss these things being canon because there were some really, really good stories there. There were some really great characters. But I get it at the same point. There were certain things that happened in the expanded universe that Lucas had okayed, because for anything involving like a major character dying, George Lucas had to give his approval. And at one point, Chewbacca was killed, and that was either, there doesn't seem to be much middle ground. That was either loved or hated. And with Disney coming back, they're going to want to bring back Chewie. So I can understand that. And then also they are going to want a clean slate, so they don't have to worry about friggin' like 20 plus years of stuff that have been going on in books, video games, comics, just so much that it cleans the slate, and then they can kind of go through and cherry pick to see, you know what, I want to lift that. I want to lift elements of that, but put my own spin on it. So I understand why they did that. But I do miss the expanded universe. because it was really solid. Now, don't get me wrong, there were a lot of bad aspects about the expanded universe. An example comes from friggin' like what gets held up as like almost the gold standard of the expanded universe is the Thrawn trilogy, also known as the Heir to the Empire trilogy. And a lot of people were thinking like this is what the unmade sequels to the unmade sequel trilogy is. And there's so much good in there. There really, really is. But then when you want to point to stuff where the expanded universe gets wacky or weak sauce, you can point to there as well. An example being there's two clones in the I almost said movie, in the book. One is Joruus C'baoth, who at first doesn't know he's a clone, and then they unpack it as he starts to get more crazy. And the difference in the spelling of the clone is it adds like an extra O or something. But then where it gets really wacky doodle is he clones Luke Skywalker from Luke's hand that he lost at Bespin in Empire, and this clone is Luke with 2 U's, because Luke in the book refuses to become C'baoth's apprentice once he realizes, yo, you're a dark side mad clone. You're bad. You're bad news. Yeah, that part is weak, but the rest of the story introduces a lot of good aspects to the expanded universe and stuff going forward. It brings in Mara Jade, eventually Mara Jade Skywalker, who becomes a great, awesome female character. It introduces that Han and Leia are getting married soon and going to have kids. In the EU, Han and Leia have 3 kids. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It's just the expanded universe, as much as I love it, it is a mixed bag. I need to recognize that, and fans should recognize it. But anyway, what I've got is a list of my top 10 favorite things from the former expanded universe, now known as the Legends. So I'm going to share that with you guys now. I don't have a fun announcer to do like number 10, so I'm going to do it. So number 10, the Heir to the Empire Thrawn trilogy, as well as the Dark Empire trilogies of novels and comics. The reason I love these so much is that they really kick-started the expanded universe. Now, don't get me wrong, there had been older expanded universe stories. I can't remember the title exactly, so please forgive me. I'll attach it in the description. But the earliest story came out in, I think, 86. Splinter of the Mind's Eye or something. Anyways, there were the Droids cartoons and the Ewoks cartoons and the Ewoks movies. But the Heir to the Empire trilogy became #1 bestsellers and showed that there was still an audience, and at least a big Star Wars fan base that would read this stuff. If this hadn't worked, then there wouldn't be the rest of the expanded universe. At the same time, there was the Dark Empire trilogy of comics, which also was a big success with Dark Horse. And they were some of the first stories that got to be told post-Jedi, involving Han, Leia, Luke, Lando, everybody. There were some, as mentioned earlier, there were some really good things, and there were some less good things. In Dark Empire, Luke falls to the dark side, and it turns out Palpatine's alive through clones. And at first, this is a really cool idea, but it kind of gets played to diminishing returns. Palpatine in the expanded universe had clones upon clones upon clones. It really does make sense for his character. And actually, that reminds me, part of what inspired me to want to talk about this was just like in the upcoming Rise of Skywalker, at the end of the trailer, you hear Palpatine's laugh. And originally, they were like, no, Palpatine dead, Palpatine dead. And it was the expanded universe, which is like, no, he came back. So yeah, it's interesting that the movies are starting to do that. I don't know if they're gonna. I doubt they'll do it a clone. It might be like a Sith spirit, like a ghost, but we'll see. But the Dark Empire series brought back Palpatine, told Luke almost falling to the dark side. He started to, and then friggin' like Leia helped bring him back, and then showed the fallout of like post Jedi, where at the end of Jedi everything seems all hunky dory, but you see like no, it's still an uphill battle for the rebels. The big guns of the Empire are gone, but it's still like a small group trying to overthrow a galaxy-wide military force. It's not going to just drop like that. Wow, my voice is cracking. So then as the story goes on, like I said, the downside is it keeps showing Palpatine like dying and then coming back, dying and coming back. It starts to lose its effect. Like you're like, yes, I know he's a master strategist, but it loses its impact. But it's still, both of these stories, if they were not the successes they were, we would have not gotten the rest of the expanded universe. Number 9. Number 9 is the Sun Crusher. It's something from the, sorry, I'm just looking for the name. I had it written down. Kevin J. Anderson's Jedi Academy trilogy. So one thing that the expanded universe really did get a lot of fair criticism for was its seeming obsession through Palpatine and the Empire with super weapons. Heck, debatably, the movies have gotten that criticism because the friggin' Death Star's shown up like 4 times. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. The Star Killer base was the Death Star. And then in the U, though, it's on an entirely different level. There was the first Death Star, the second Death Star, the Death Star prototype, which is in this trilogy of novels, the Eye of Palpatine, the Galaxy gun, the Eclipse, the Darksaber, the World Devastators, and more. Heck, look up on Wikipedia, the Star Wars Wiki, super weapons. It has its own very long page. So it does get played to diminishing returns. Again, it's just like friggin' A, another super weapon, like not even the good friggin' A. But one that I personally loved was the Sun Crusher. Now, for some people, they're like, this is the epitome of what was wrong with the obsession with super weapons in the expanded universe, and I get it. It is overpowered to a ridiculous degree. It's got something that's called quantum crystalline armor, which is an incredibly rare mineral thing that makes the ship virtually indestructible, which can be boring, and I get why people don't like it, but I kind of dug it. What I love, and it also had something called resonance torpedoes, which had a chemical compound in it. Basically, what the Sun Crusher would do it's a small ship, can be manned by a single pilot. It would fly into a system, fire its torpedoes into the sun of that system, and then due to the chemical compound on it, it would set off a chain reaction that would cause the star to supernova, and then it would destroy entire systems instead of just single planets. Heck, you saw kind of that a little bit. You know how I said cherry pick? They kind of did that with the Star Killer base, where the Star Killer base wipes out systems, be it with a Death Star super laser, instead of a single planet. But what I really liked about the Sun Crusher was the idea of the Death Star is a symbol of fear. But you see that sucker coming. You know it's on the way. You've got time to rally a fight or friggin' flee. But with the idea of the Sun Crusher, even when you take away its friggin' plot armor or its crystalline armor, like it flies into a single small fighter isn't going to set off many warnings. It flies into the system. It does its torpedo thing, and then it wipes out billions of lives unnoticed. And that to me is much more interesting and much more scary. It's the fear factor of, is this coming? When is it coming? We won't know. That to me is a much more terrorizing attack than just like, we're going to throw the Death Star at you, because you know that's coming. But this thing, you don't know when or if it'll strike. And if it has, are you too late? You don't really get any warnings, unless, like in the book, friggin' Kip Duran, just after he does it, he's like, yo, I did this, because Kip fell to the dark side, Exar Kun, all that. Yeah, and also, like, friggin' reading as a kid, a ship that can fly through the bridge of a Star Destroyer unscathed, that's pretty awesome. And it also took a shot from the Death Star prototype, but the prototype had the super laser at full power, and that's normally a KO blow. And seeing it take that and it only like take out like a quarter to half the health, that's pretty cool. I mean, I get it. Again, I know it's overpowered, but I love the idea of it's terrorizing, and the fear that it can instill, knowing like something like this is out there, but you don't know when or if it's going to strike. To me, that's much scarier and in line with the Tarkin doctrine of Star Wars, where it's fear overpowers everything. I would have loved to see it or elements of it implemented into the current trilogy, but we're not going to do that, and I get it, and that's fair. Number 8 was the Force Unleashed games, and specifically the character of Galen Marek and his clone Starkiller. The games were what they were. They were a heck of a lot of fun to play. I mean, especially for the second one, the stories were too short. The gameplay was debatably really repetitive, but you would never had never gotten and have yet to get again a character who just used the Force in such a way. Galen was intended to be a photo negative of Luke Skywalker. It was, what if Darth Vader at his like dark sideiest had an apprentice, and he taught Galen to use the Force as a weapon. Galen was using the Force as a friggin' wrecking crew uses a wrecking ball. Like, he would like, you're using the lightning, you're disintegrating people. Limbs are flying off when lightsabers are cutting. Like, the Force choke would be on like 5 dudes, and Force repulse would send people flying. And like, he delighted in using his powers in this way, and it was a lot of fun to play. And then as the character grew in the first one, he became a good character, and then he died sacrificially at the end. The second game, you're left wondering the whole time. They later confirmed that it was a clone, but you are a clone of Galen Marek, but you don't know that at the time. You're told you are, but you've got memories of things that you shouldn't as a clone. Clones shouldn't have Force powers when the original character does. So there was a lot of good story aspects to the second one. The series was frustratingly left hanging because Disney shut down LucasArts, so we never got the third story to wrap it up, because the way that ends, friggin' the characters are on the way to Yavin with Vader as a prisoner, and you have no idea how he gets out. Like, friggin' finish it in a comic or something. Number 7 is the Rogue Squadron series for Nintendo. For me, this is very nostalgic. The first game on N64 was great. The second and third games on GameCube were awesome. The only kind of misfire in Rogue Squadron 3, Rebel Strike, or is it Rogue Leader? I think it's Rogue Leader. Is the missions where you are running around on the floor out of a ship. That aspect of it was hard to control and less fun to replay. But what made these games so much fun was the combination of battles that we had seen in the movies. The Death Star Trench Run, always great to play. The Battle of Hoth, so much fun. Each one evolved the platform with it. And even like Battle of Endor in the second one, you didn't do the Death Star part, or did you? Right, yeah, you did. I can't remember. And I played it not too long ago. But the Battle of Endor, like it had so much replayability, but it also added in battles that you didn't know about or had been hinted at in the books and in the comics but hadn't been expanded upon. So there was a lot of stuff, reasons to go back. You got to play as every rebel ship, the V-Wing that they introduce in friggin' the Dark Empire comics. You get to play it. You're battling against the World Devastator, something that, again, introduced in the comic. You get to play as the Naboo Starfighter. Friggin', I remember as a kid being so excited when you learned of the cheat code to play as the Naboo Starfighter. I'm not the biggest fan of Episode 1, but I've always liked that ship. And it was a fun ship to play as. It did get loose with the continuity of stuff a little bit. I mean, because you're getting to replay with ships and that used weapons that the ships never used. So in Rogue Squadron 3, you get to, in one level, you're facing off against Imperials. You crash land on Geonosis. There's friggin' battle droids still active, which wouldn't happen. And then you find Wedge finds a Jedi Starfighter and flies around in it. And the Jedi Starfighter has lasers, which that era of Jedi Starfighter in Attack of the Clones had no weapons. And then it also had the seismic charges things that friggin' Slave One used in Attack of the Clones, which it wouldn't. So it got fast and loose with stuff in the replay, but it was fun. So you're willing to overlook it. I mean, the seismic charges in that game are so much fun to use. Friggin' A. I do wish this series was still going. I would love it if a non-lame Battlefront remake was happening. Sorry about that, dear listener / viewer. Friggin', you've probably heard Luna out back. She's playing with our neighbor's dog, Beyonce, and I was just getting them some new water. You've heard her scratching at the window. It is a hot one outside. It is currently 30 degrees. They are having a lot of fun and being well hydrated. Anyways, back to the topic. We are at number 6, the Yuuzhan Vong. So this is, again, one that kind of somewhat divides the fan base, but I like it. And for me, this is more of a case of liking what something represents more than what we necessarily got. So I'm going to unpack that. The Yuuzhan Vong War was an event that tied all the titles in the expanded universe, the franchise, together. It shook things up. Chewie, Anakin Solo, and other characters died. Coruscant, was destroyed. It gave the Jedi an enemy that wasn't the Sith, and they struggled against, because the Vong were absent from the Force, because they came from a different galaxy. They are a warrior race that actually took inspiration from the Aztecs. And one of their high up people at the time realized, like, if they ever realize their connection to the Force, like, they're going to use this terribly. So it essentially removed them from the Force. So they are absent from the Force. So a lot of Force powers do not work on them. The Jedi can't sense them, can't sense their intention. They also had weapons and armor that were resistant to lightsabers. It gave the New Republic an enemy that wasn't someone just trying to reunify the Empire. So it really shook the stories up and broke them out of the repeating cycle that they had been in. Because the EU was very, like Star Wars, as I've said in the past, is very cyclical. Like, things happen in beats. They really do go in a circle. This changed that for a while, and I really, really dug that. I liked that it was like, let's shake up the status quo, because the sales were going down a bit, interest was less. Now, did the story go on too long? Absolutely. Was it flawed? 100%. Was the execution perfect? No. Was there some really good stuff there, though? Absolutely. I know some people, again, don't like that Chewie died, but they didn't even do it in a way where it was like the Vong killed. It wasn't like on Star Trek where it's like, oh, hey, to show how strong a character is, let's have Worf get thrown across the room. Like the Vong did something that caused the moon to like go out of orbit and fall on a planet, and Chewie died, making sure Anakin and others got away on the Falcon. His death, like his last description before he dies, is as the moon's entering the atmosphere, he's like roaring defiantly at it, which is to me a very Chewie thing. I know some people don't dig it and they think it's stupid, but I'll respectfully disagree. But the thing is, it really gave the expanded universe a kick in the pants. There were some really, really good stories coming forward after this. Also some bad ones. We'll call a spade a spade. It wasn't perfect, but there was some really good things to come out of it. I like that they were trying something new. Yeah, the Yuuzhan Vong, I dig. At one point, they were going to include them in the Clone Wars show without going into their backstory, but they were going to include hints of them, and I like that. We're going to get into it in another bit later, but what I liked with the Vong is they've been here a while. In the books, they show up en masse, but they had been covertly in for a while, and further things expanded on that. Number 5 is the Legacy comic. So Star Wars Legacy took place something like 136 years after Return of the Jedi. So I've talked about it before, but the thing I really, really liked about it was having it take place that far away from Jedi really removes it, and it gets to tell its own story. Again, Star Wars stories are cyclical, so the Jedi are almost wiped out by a returning Sith. There is a rebellion. There is an empire. That stuff happens. It's borderline Star Wars' bread and butter. It's ingrained in the DNA, basically. But you got introduced to some really cool new characters. You got Cade Skywalker, who is a descendant of Luke's, who after his father dies and the Jedi Order is borderline wiped out, he becomes a bounty hunter. He's addicted to death sticks. He's trying to numb himself from the Force, and he's actually handing in Jedi over to the Sith Empire on bounties. Like he's a rough dude, but he slowly comes back. You're introduced to so many other interesting and cool characters. You see where the galaxy's at. You're introduced to the first proper group of gray Jedi, the Imperial Knights. The Sith in this are very different than the Sith we've got before. Darth Krayt is the borderline opposite of Palpatine, not in the sense of being a master strategist, but Palpatine was very much an adherent to Darth Bane, who was originally brought up in the expanded universe and is canon. He was very much Palpatine was an adherent of Darth Bane's rule of 2, always a master and apprentice. Krayt was like, no, we are one Sith. I rule. You're all lords, but I'm the Lord, and you are all subservient of me. So there were hundreds of Sith, it seemed like. And Krayt, you found out later, had been, I think, a character named Asad Het, who was basically a sand person who became a Jedi, who encountered Obi-Wan on Tatooine. He got away from the Great Jedi Purge, ended up on Tatooine, went with his people, the Sand People, encountered Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan, instead of killing him, removed his mask, which is a huge insult in Sand People culture, so he was abandoned. There's a huge story as to how he had survived so long, but he was an interesting character. And then the other really cool thing with Cade was he would have flashbacks with Force Ghost. You got Force Ghost Anakin, and then gangster scary Force Ghost Vader. You got Force Ghost Mara Jade, who, again, great character, who had her own shady past. And then Force Ghost Luke. R2 was there somehow because, of course, R2 is there. But it's a really, really good read. I'd really recommend looking it up. There was a second one that I haven't fully read that had a distant relative of the Solos. But like I said, I never read it. I've heard good things. So on to number 4, Knights of the Old Republic, and specifically Revan. So there were, much like Legacy, with Knights of the Old Republic, it took place like thousands upon thousands of years, something like 30, or I think, yeah, like 30,000 years before the Phantom Menace. You had Knights of the Old Republic. Again, there was the Republic. There was a Sith Empire. The Jedi were losing a war and almost all but extinct, and yada, yada, yada. Star Wars. But it is still a compelling game. And then its sequel, though not as good, was still great and introduced awesome gangster characters like this guy, Darth Nihilus, who looks awesome. My webcam's footage is not that good, so please look him up. He's a very crazy, interesting character, who they almost included in the Clone Wars cartoon, which would have been great. And they almost included Revan, also would have been great. But the most compelling thing out of that was the character of Revan, who in the game you are playing as, but you don't know till later. He was a Jedi, fell to the dark side. When after fighting in the Mandalorian Wars, he and his eventual apprentice Malak went into the far edges of the known galaxy, the outside region. Dang it, I'm getting it wrong, but I'm going to say the outside regions. I'm wrong. Please correct me. Anyways, and then they found the original Sith Empire, which they really, really unpack in the Old Republic MMO, which I'm not as into. Anyways, they come back, Sith Lords, and his whole idea is like, we are going to become, like, we're going to do this where either if the motivation behind falling to the dark side was interesting. It's like, okay, if we win, then we're going to be strong enough to fight the true Sith, like the Sith Emperor, and when they try to invade. If we don't, then we've made the Republic strong enough to do this. There's so much lore from these games and great characters, like Bastila. Damn it, Bastila. There we go. Bastila, Cartho Nassi, the assassin droid HK-47. So good, so good. Sorry, Luna's at the window. Really do yourself the favor, look up these games if you haven't played them. There is also a series of movies, fan films, zero profit made, but really entertaining, that you can look up online. The Knights of the Old Republic trilogy. It's really well done, especially considering it's like they create new footage for it out of footage for a video game. They do they do a great job. It's not just like, hey, watch someone play a game and here's the cinematics and we'll call it a movie. No, they use the game, but they do a great job. Really look them up if you're interested. Number 3 is Shadows of the Empire. Shadows was my gateway into the expanded universe. So I've got a deep love for Star Wars. My father, who passed away in '99, introduced it to me and my brother. The original trilogy are the first non-cartoon movies I ever saw. They made me love film. So I friggin' love Star Wars. And yeah, Shadows was in 3rd grade. I was reading at like a 2nd grade level. And then in 4th grade, I found the book Shadows of the Empire, and it was written for high schoolers. And then suddenly I was reading at a high school level because I found books that were interesting to me. And Shadows was my gateway into the expanded universe. It had crazy, interesting characters like Dash Rendar. Sorry, Luna is just really going to town on the window. And the new villain, Prince Shizor. and it took place between Empire and Jedi, and it had a really interesting story, a great Nintendo 64 game, along with a better computer version. There was a book, a comic book, a junior novel, and friggin' toys. And the best thing from it was the score. The score is amazing. If you're a Star Wars music fan, look this up. It's unless you knew, it's like a hidden treasure. Joel McNeely, I would love to see him do a proper Star Wars score, hopefully with the next trilogy. And the thing with the Shadows of the Empire was, earlier I mentioned how friggin' the Thrawn trilogy and the Dark Empire trilogy of comics, they showed that there was the Star Wars audience would still buy. What Shadows of the Empire did was it showed that there was a wider audience beyond just Star Wars fans who were still in, because it had everything for a movie except a movie. It had all the tie-ins, everything, and people ate it up in droves. And if Shadows of the Empire wasn't successful, we probably wouldn't have gotten to the special editions, and we probably wouldn't have gotten to the prequels. Lucas started writing the prequels in '94, but he wasn't sure there was still an audience for it. Shadows of the Empire was that test, and it passed in flying colors. All right. Sorry about that, y'all. I'm sure you can now hear Luna is in the house. I just had to take Beyonce home. So that does it for Shadows of the Empire. On to number 2. Sorry, I'm killing my throat doing that. Number 2 is easily what the expanded universe did with Palpatine and introducing Plagueis. I friggin' love what they did with Palpatine. Because in the movies, especially at Jedi, he took him from being the man behind Vader and turned him into the big bad. He was just pure evil. Like in the movies, he's like, I am the Senate. Like, it would have been fitting if he would have said, I am the dark side. He had a plan for everything. Now, they showed this in the movies, that he was Machiavellian and like planning everything, or like Iago, not the parrot, but the character from Othello, who had contingencies and everything. But in the expanded universe, it was tenfold. He had a plan for everything. He had placeholder apprentices. He knew who to maneuver in and out of power to cause conflict. He knew who to kill, who to exploit, and where to have clones upon clones of yourself so your tyranny can never end. Again, diminishing returns, but what you gonna do? If you want a really good example of how evil Palpatine is and just how insanely intricate and everything his plans were, look no further than his Wikipedia article, the Legends version. And then also Plagueis was crazy interesting, because he's the Sith Lord who finds and then steers Palpatine. Now, make no mistake, he's a bad guy. He is a Sith Lord after all, but he's not evil like Palpatine was. His whole thing was manipulating midichlorians to create, not create life, but make it so you could not die. They hint at this in Revenge of the Sith. And in Revenge of the Sith, they could have just name-dropped him and moved on. But the EU, as it does, expanded upon it. And I really like what they added. He was, through his midichlorian manipulation, Anakin Skywalker was created. Now, that's not to say he created Anakin, but it was him and Palpatine. He had friggin' Plagueis had killed his Sith master. I think his name was Tenenbaum or Tenenbaums or something. Tenenbaum, whatever. David Tennant. And he didn't fully kill him. He kind of kept him alive, like basically in stasis. And then he would just manipulate the midichlorians and everything so he could study and prolong life and all that. His eventual goal was to have Palpatine rule the galaxy but he would still be alive, because the way of the Sith is always like the apprentice eventually kills the master. But he didn't want that. He treated Palpatine as an equal, not from the get-go, but for a long time. And that ended up being his weakness, because Palpatine's all about power and all about being in control. He is a huge part of the grand Sith scheme. And there was a scene where it's like, after they did the thing with the midichlorians and all that, I can't remember what exactly they did, but there was huge disturbance in the Force, and they felt the Force react to them. I really liked that. That the Force, because the Force uses people and whatever, but the Force acted itself. And I kind of liked that a lot. Yeah, I love that they added what they added to Plagueis and Palpatine in the expanded universe, and I love that they showed how just the Clone Wars show. One of its greatest things is it shows how stagnant the Jedi Order had become, and how unaware. But then the books, the expanded universe, show just how much the Sith were really manipulating everything. Friggin' Palpatine was taking a young Darth Maul to the Jedi Temple on a tour, like away from the main chamber or close enough to it where Yoda or Mace might get tipped off, but like walking around and pointing out to young Maul, like, you're going to kill that guy. Like, these are our targets. You're going to get them. It was really, really interesting. Just how the galaxy on the whole, the Sith had been subtly manipulating events from behind the scenes. The Jedi weren't aware of their existence anymore. Basically, since Darth Bane, now there was one Sith who did something stupid that made the Jedi briefly aware of their existence, but it had been hundreds of years, I believe, since that. So the Jedi weren't aware. It's the idea of the Force was outflowing through these two. Bane's like, we've got too many people diluting its power and y'all are stupid. So two Force users using one side untapped, like, insanely strong. I love what they did with Palpatine. My number one favorite thing, though, is how it tied everything together. It's number one easily. There was Lucas actually had a team specifically keeping track of all the continuity, because there's a couple different levels of continuity. It's like the movie continuity, and then these. The movies can change stuff. The books don't inform the movies. The movies inform the books. Now, there was stuff that Lucas saw from the expanded universe, like Aayla Secura, the Twi'lek Jedi, who dies, is briefly seen in Attack of the Clones, but is the one who gets shot repeatedly on Felucia during the Great Jedi Purge scene in friggin' Sith. Quaylen Boss also is someone he took from the expanded universe, and it's really oh man, he is so good. But like, what having someone on there, like having a team, really kept everything in line. So then when eventual inconsistencies happened, they could be retconned easily. So originally, up until The Phantom Menace came out, there was a borderline embargo being like, you cannot talk about before A New Hope. You cannot talk about, like, you can reference kind of the Clone Wars, but you can't really you can't tell these stories because I'm going to tell them. There was little stuff allowed, like I said, like mentioning the Clone Wars, like friggin' who created the Death Star and all that, which eventually again got retconned. But with having this team and the ever-changing nature of it, they could retcon it quickly. Some examples being friggin' there was a book, I, Jedi, that retconned and corrected. It came out after at least Attack of the Clones, if not Revenge of the Sith. And then it retconned information that stuff that we got in the Jedi Academy trilogy, which came out before The Phantom Menace. Then there was the Outbound Flight Project, which was now that is a story and a thing, which again, check out the Wikipedia article. It's really interesting. It was something briefly talked about in the Thrawn trilogy because it was tied to both the backstories of Jorah C'baoth and Thrawn himself. But then the later Outbound Flight novel tied it into the Sidious's plots to destroy the Jedi, and it also hints at the upcoming Yuzong Vong War, that Sidious is aware of them. He doesn't want to let any secrets slip into their hands. He's heard of these great outsiders. He's aware they're coming, and he doesn't want this outbound flight to slip into their hands. And also he's got the opportunity to kill like 12 knights and 3 masters. He's not going to pass that up. That was a really cool retcon because then it tied in a past story with a further past, but then also with something that was coming from the future. Another one was in the Thrawn trilogy, the Clone Wars are stated by a race called the Nagri, to be a decade earlier or later, I can't remember, than they were as shown in Attack of the Clones. So then what they did in the books is they revealed later that the Nagri have a different calendar than what was the standard, the Old Republic and then the Empire. Basically what the majority of the galaxy used as their calendar, the Nagri weren't using. So little things like that where it can be like, okay, we thought this was true, but this wasn't true. And it's not like a huge retcon. They made it work very organically, almost like as you're hearing stories, you're hearing snippets, you're hearing sides, and then you're getting the full picture. They really implemented that really, really well. Yeah, the thing I miss about the expanded universe now, it's happening in the current comics and that, but outside of the Darth Vader ones, I'm just not as interested. Like, I miss Star Wars where every single thing was connected. Like Marvel's killing it on the movie front. Their shows are connected, in not in name only. They are, but they're also their isolated own thing. But this was one of the few things where a video game, like a video game's plot, a book's plot, a comic book's plot and a movie's plot, they were all related. Now, granted, the movie was the thing that informed the others, but most of the time you get a movie, you get a tie-in game, you get a tie-in book, you get a tie-in comic, but the book and comic and game aren't connected. Whereas with this, you got a movie, but then the book has something that you'll later play or will expand upon something that was briefly mentioned in the book. And then the comic as well. I miss that interconnection was outstanding. It was the fun part of being a Star Wars fan. The expanded universe, like I said earlier, did have a lot of cheese, but it had a lot of really good things. Yeah, so thank you, dear listener, for taking the time to, if you're a Star Wars fan, go down memory lane with me. If you're not, I hope this was interesting, and really check out those Wikipedia articles. Yeah, I Star Wars, like I said, is my OG franchise. It's my OG nerd love. It will hold a special place in my heart because my father introduced it to me. It's what made me love film. It was the first thing where I became aware of like wider world that you could really latch on and sink your teeth into. Really good storytelling. It's heck, even toys. Like this thing, you can't see it very well, is technically not canon anymore. This is an action figure with the Sebastian Shaw, who originally played Anakin in Return of the Jedi. Now, he still technically does. He was the cat in Vader's helmet. And then he was the Force ghost at the end of Jedi, but now the canon is it's Hayden Christensen's ghost. So it's just little bits of like, through this kind of thing, you get little bits of your childhood along with some really, really fun stories. All right. With all that being said, dear listener, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If there's anything I can pray for you, please let me know. And as always, please check out, like I said earlier, Redeemed Otaku, who does some great stuff with anime and also great biblical illustrations, great biblical talks. They're really good. Faith and Fandom Book 6 is out. Check that out. It's wonderful. Yeah, I appreciate you guys, and I'm praying for you all. And please pray for me and One Cross Radio, because as much as I love talking about the nerd stuff, ultimately my prayer is that God is using this platform and podcast to expand His glory, even through just talking about fun nonsense stuff. As much as I love Star Wars, in the grand scheme of things, it's anyways, not pooping on fandoms. Friggin' love fandoms. All that being said, thank you for your support. Thank you for listening, and hope you have a wonderful day. And God bless, my friends. Take care. Peace.